ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Quiet riot.
But perhaps the most shocking response of all was from the commander-in-chief himself.
President Trump posted, "Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery."
That's it. No exclamation points, no all caps, no insults. Whole thing spelled correctly. I wonder when they saw this post, True Social sent him a security alert. They just sent him a quick message. "We noticed some suspicious humanity on your account. If this was, in fact, you, President Trump, please reply, Nancy Pelosi's husband is gay." Just reply that. But the fact that Trump responded to Biden's diagnosis with the most pro forma, bare minimum ChatGPT statement was so astonishing. Even the corrupt lamestream media gave Trump his props.
This is a very traditional comment in this moment from President Trump to former President Biden.
I mean, it's a very human, very traditional response from President Trump.
I was very, very pleased to see President Trump putting forward such a kind statement.
Has any president, has any person ever had a lower bar to clear than "I have to salute the president"? And I certainly disagree with him on many things, but I have to applaud that after hearing this devastating news about Joe Biden, that Donald did not take cancer's side.
Quiet riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the little sibling to our Thursday Big Brother show. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex. How's this week been, Naomi, post-summit?
Obviously a biggie with the summit and everything that has happened after that, and the numbers of people asking me for Best for Britain's view and our take on it all. And I've had quite a few interesting follow-up meetings with different people from member states, from within government, and real mixed views, actually, depending on who you speak to as to whether they are feeling buoyant or not about it. So life goes on, but we had the most lovely end to the week, didn't we? Because it was our first birthday as a podcast, and we had an editorial meeting with all of our lovely backers.
Yeah, it feels
It was
weird,
lovely,
right?
wasn't it?
First birthday, though.
I
That
know.
really crept up on us.
I wonder how many shows we've done.
I think it's got to be over 200 or round about there,
Wow.
because there were some really intense months. If you think about, the attempt on Trump's life and all the madness that was going out with the election,
Yeah.
on top of us having a new government here and
Yep.
everything going crazy here. I mean, there are
And
some
then
weeks.
there was the US election, and
Yeah. So there were some weeks that were like 5 episodes.
wow. I'm glad we're not doing quite that level now.
I know. So this is our 61st episode this year,
Oh my goodness.
but I reckon in the 7 months, or not 7 months, 6 and a bit months that we were going in 2024, it must have been over 100. So that's my sense. But it still crept up on me. I was looking at the data, and we're now over 2 million downloads, which is just extraordinary, really.
Mildly terrifying when I think about it.
Yeah, but that is a good year's work, right?
It is. But I still, like, when friends or family say, "Oh, yeah, no, I heard Alex and you." So I'm like, "What are you? You actually listen?"
I
I
know.
do just sometimes forget people actually listen.
Our supporters were there to remind us when we had our editorial meeting on Thursday, which
Yeah.
was really lovely. And we really did mine them for information, because
Clever bunch,
we
aren't they?
wanted to know, like, how they listen, when they listen, why they listen when they listen, how they want the balance of topics and guests to shift, and On the guest front, actually, everyone thinks that we really have been getting it right the last few months. Everyone is saying that there's been a series of episodes with cracking guests. So that's...
Marcia really enjoyed herself this week.
Oh my God, she was so good to have, wasn't she? Such a nice energy in the room as well.
One of life's angels, that woman.
Goodness. Yeah, so
Really liked her.
she can come back for sure.
And thank you to everyone that sent her nice messages. If you're listening to this, she said she's had lots of lovely feedback directly. The quality of our backers is unreal. They have very considered views, fantastic ideas, really moving stories from some people. We had one guy who was, a medic, and he was in his scrubs, and he was like, I can't stay on for long, got to go off and deliver a baby.
No, so beautiful. And then people from Australia and people from France and people from San Francisco. It was just such a lovely community feel to it, It feels family.
It does. A lot of people saying they found their tribe, which means the world to us, because that's always what we wanted to create with this show. And lots of people wanting more Europe content, which was heartening to me, because I worry that I overdo that sometimes and it might get a bit dull. But they're an internationalist bunch, so more of that.
So really heartfelt thanks to everyone that tuned in, and hopefully even more people will come next time, because we really do listen to you. This really is your show. And I know it's easy to be cynical and think just for show, it's just a backer benefit that they offer, but doesn't really counter anything. But that's not true. We really do curate a feel for how we're doing from you.
Absolutely. And remember, if you want to be at the next one, head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. Back us for as little as £5 a month or more if you can afford it, and you will absolutely get an invite to the next one. We tend to do them quarterly, so it'll probably be end of the summer when we convene everyone again.
But before that, there will be an Ask Us Anything session, which is kind of our more informal social, I guess, for the fam. But if you can't afford to do that, fear not, because our promise is that our content will always be freely available to everyone at the same time, nothing behind a paywall, and you can help us in loads of ways. You can use our bookshop to buy your summer reads. You can leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can share your favorite episode with a friend to help us reach new people. You can even be sneaky and subscribe to us across multiple platforms. They don't know you're the same person, you see.
And as promised, this weekend, we wanted to bring you the latest from Gaza, what Israel is up to. And rather than give you our amateurish take in the main show, we wanted to do that this weekend. So we've interviewed Arthur Snell, expert on foreign policy. So keep listening on for that. But Alex, what should you and I dive into beforehand?
We wanted to talk about the sort of eye-catching U-turn that's been signaled on winter fuel payments.
Yeah.
And the sort of reports of discord within Number 10, briefing and counter-briefing. And also, as an extra little bit, we thought we'd delve into the latest Office of National Statistics immigration stats, which came out on Friday and are really quite striking.
So without further ado, let's crack on with the show. Quiet Riot. Reports from the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting on Monday made for pretty grim reading, with arguments over everything from immigration rhetoric to welfare cuts. The winter fuel allowance has consistently been raised on the doorsteps and at MP surgeries, and was again a bone of contention at the meeting. Come Wednesday at PMQs, Keir Starmer was able to announce that if by the time of the budget, Treasury coffers have been replenished somewhat, the government will seek to return the winter fuel payment to certain lower income groups. Let's have a listen.
But I recognise that people are still feeling the pressure of the cost of living crisis, including pensioners. And as the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
So, Alex, when is a U-turn not quite a U-turn?
I have a feeling I'm going to annoy you.
Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Because I do think this isn't a U-turn because the fundamental change that Labour brought in was that the winter fuel payment should be means tested. And they may be talking about the threshold now and increasing the threshold, but they're not talking about changing that fundamental philosophical choice that there are people who shouldn't be getting help with winter fuel payments.
And
So I think
there are plenty of them that shouldn't.
so I think in this case, the U-turn is not a U-turn.
I agree. No, it isn't. It isn't. And it's all contingent on whether or not the economy picks up, which,
Yeah, I think they will have to do something now, right? Now that he said, look, we're looking to do something, it'll be really hard for them not to shift even a little bit on it.
I mean, I'm definitely on the supportive end of the spectrum with regards to their policy on winter fuel allowance. I don't think, wealthy pensioners need it or should get it, particularly when it's the same government taking away welfare payments from those that desperately need them. So I'm all for means testing it. I think you've spotted some usual suspects in the media with bad takes. What have you got for us?
Suncoats, it has gone particularly OTT. So he writes, number 10 and number 11 have crossed the Rubicon. They have provided a precedent whereby they whip out the checkbook in the face of political pressure, even though we're years from a general election. I mean, just take a moment to absorb that. Like, when was that a fucking Rubicon? What is he talking about? I mean, has he forgotten, like, pasty tax or do you know what I mean? Owen Patterson, like, I get it. I get that people have to make a splash in order to get people to click on their content, but this is ludicrous. His thesis is that financial markets now have got their BDI on the UK again because basically they're thinking, oh, what are they going to U-turn on next? And the fiscal responsibility that they signal is obviously not real. I mean, based on what? To call this a minute change of a minor domestic policy is to give it too much credit in terms of how much it will cost. And all the usual people who were tracking breathlessly bond yields and gilt rates by the hour back in January when they were going up and saying that Rachel Reeves was obviously toast and was going to have to resign, they're now again very interested in them because they're sort of nudging up. And they didn't seem to be at all interested with them while they were going down. And I've seen even suggestions from credible commentators that the fact 30-year rates are now higher than during the Liz Truss mini budget episode is evidence of Reeves messing up just as badly or even worse. But the unique feature of the Truss episode is that they weren't tracking global rates.
No.
You know, they shot up while others rose very, very slowly. Rates are higher everywhere now. They're higher in the US, they're higher in Japan, they're higher in Germany. The UK rates are tracking US rates. And to look at this environment where you have Trump threatening 50% tariffs on the
Europe,
EU and come to the conclusion that markets are worried about the threshold of the winter fuel payment. I mean, that is demented. That is deranged.
I know that tomorrow the Times and other papers are just going to be full of Brexit benefit. We could have had 50%. And you talk about journalists failing to track financial market data accurately. Their lack of understanding of trade and how interconnected it is and how it works just never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that element has always been there, right? The notion that if we are doing
Zero sum.
better than Europe, it's somehow something we should be gleeful about.
Yeah.
When actually you want your closest and biggest trading partner
The people
to be
you
doing
trade
great.
most with to have the most money
Yeah.
to trade back with you.
You want them to be doing great.
Anyway,
Silly people.
on trade deals, Alex, the government will presumably be hoping that India deal, US deal, EU summit deal, and now this potential winter fuel backpedaling might give them a poll bump. Do you think it's going to work? Do you think we are going to see people looking more favourably upon the government in the short term?
Honestly, I don't know. There are sort of two ways a voter turning off a party. One of them is sort of policy specific and frustration with what they're actually doing. And another way is a sort of general give up on them. And what I don't know is how many people that have been turned off by Labour's recent policies are in the category where they say they're messing up at the moment, but hopefully they'll get better, or in the category that says, I just give up with them and won't even give them a hearing.
Hear them, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there is a little bit of stat coming in that bodes well. The monthly consumer survey that tracks consumer confidence, that's gone up in May by 3 points, which is a sort of a significant rise. There is more optimism among households about their financial outlook and the wider economy.
Yeah.
And that is usually a precursor of people looking more kindly at how the government is handling
running
the
things,
economy.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe that is an early sign that people are beginning to feel a little bit more confident about things. As the weather gets better, that would be quite a good time for a bit more consumer optimism, because a lot of people tend to spend money this time of year, to do up their garden or get new tables and chairs or go out or go on
Booking
holiday or
holidays and
whatever it is. This is a time of year when traditionally people do spend a little bit of money on their home, on themselves, on new clothes, on going away. So if those two things coincide, we may see actually a little economic nudge up, but it's too early to tell, obviously.
Quiet Riot. Today's episode is sponsored by the wonderful people at Shopify. Alex, do you recognise that sound?
I can't say that I do.
Well, it is the sound of a sale on Shopify. I've been using Shopify for years to power the Best for Britain shop, and it's got me thinking that we definitely need to use Shopify for selling Quiet Riot merch.
Oh, and we're getting there, aren't we? We're very close to getting our first Quiet Riot merchandise up and running. I've seen some early designs. It feels like everyone but me has a side hustle nowadays. I don't even have a Substack.
Exactly. And Shopify, it just sort of like takes all of the hassle out of selling things. I don't know what we'd do without it at Best for Britain, because it's an all-in-one commerce platform. You don't need to learn any tricky coding or faff around with the back end of your website. It's very much plug and play, and it just works. And it means that you can just get on with selling things quickly, easily, and cost effectively.
I mean, for a small company like us, there's only the three of us. That's me sold, because the last thing I want to be doing is trying to manage yet another process. And I like the idea that Shopify can help you get selling across other marketplaces like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, not just your own site. Because I think that actually there is the potential for our merchandise to go viral. I really feel it in my bones, especially our range of Christmas jumpers. I think they will do very, very well. Plus, I hear that, unlike us, Shopify have won awards. And with an extensive business course library, they're just there ready to support a business in every way they need.
Quiet Riot listeners, Shopify want to help you to get selling as well. So they've got an incredible deal. You can sign up for a £1 only trial month at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot. That's all lowercase.
So go to shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot to take your business to the next level today. Huge thanks to today's sponsor, Shopify, and remember to sign up for a £1 trial period at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot, all lowercase.
Quiet Riot. Journalist Adam Bienkov wrote a really damning piece about Starmer's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, earlier this week, and it really focused on McSweeney's career credentials, or as he would sort of see it, lack of them.
Yeah. I mean, It could have been entitled "He Ain't All That."
Yeah,
That, I think, is
basically.
the
Yeah. The
general
emperor
vibe,
wears
right?
no clothes. Yeah. It feels to me like the kind of like anti McSweeney direction of travel gang within the Labour movement more broadly are really beginning to flex their muscle after the local elections and say, this is not working. You've got to change direction. Do you think that this is sort of going to be something and nothing, or do you think it could potentially boil up into being a thing and that the reform light agenda might move closer to getting ditched
Hmm.
as we go into the second half of the year?
I mean, again, I don't know, but the first thing to say is that Adam, whom I very much respect, has never been a massive fan of Blue Labour. So that colours his judgment. I happen to agree with him, but I'm not a big fan of Blue Labour either.
Mm.
So that colours my judgment. It's interesting because the conventional wisdom, I think, after the local election was that this was going to strengthen the hand of the Blue Labour lot, right? And we even saw some signs of that happening immediately after the local election.
Well, the island of strangers speech
Well,
was rooted
and
in it.
precisely that, I think, was the turning point. So the island of strangers speech was seen as an overreach and as a turnoff by so many people that I think whatever advantage they thought they gained from the local election to press their agenda, I think they overplayed it. And I think
Yeah.
it's backfired and backfired badly. So we now have a significant briefing and counter briefing operation going on about the two-child cap. Basically, people are saying that Starmer wants to abolish the two-child cap, but McSweeney basically is against that.
Mm.
And Starmer is not sort of backing down, so he sees it as still an option on the table for the upcoming budget, presumably in the
Mm.
autumn. Look, all of that is gossip, so you can safely ignore it. What isn't gossip, what is fact, is that there are now factions within Number 10 which are briefing against each other to
Yeah.
the papers.
And then you had the accusation by Kemi Badenoch at PMQs that it was Angela Rayner who herself leaked her correspondence with Rachel Reeves over wealth taxes. And whether or not that's true, that is now out there in the ether as another area where there appears to be disagreement within the top team.
My experience of this sort of thing tells me that it is never the person that would obviously benefit from the leak that has leaked it. It is almost, it is so politically naive to do that, and it involves such obvious dangers that it is almost never the case. That's my experience. I don't know what you think about it because you
Yeah,
also have a good feel of, the inside of this Number
m
10.
the way it tends to work, and this isn't unique to this Number 10, this is my experience from having worked relatively closely with a few governments, is that the person wants it out there, but they will never, ever have their fingerprints anywhere near it, so they, turn a blind eye to an ally being the one to they'll accidentally leave it on the
Yes,
photocopier.
yeah, maybe that kind of indirect leaking does happen, but often it is the case that actually someone whose agenda aligns will leak something that is helpful to one side and damaging to the other in order to advance the general.
Indeed,
Do,
and we've
do you
seen
know what I
now.
mean?
I do, and we've seen since then the leak that Angela Rayner wants immigrants to pay more in terms of NHS levy, and those that maybe are angry with the island of stranger speech are now trying to say, well, don't think she's going to be the great immigrants ally
Yeah.
in all of this.
And so that was definitely, yeah, that was definitely a counter brief, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so I'll give you a scenario, right? I'm absolutely saying, and I want people to really, really get this. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just setting out a hypothetical, okay? So it would make more sense to me if Angela Rayner leaked the stuff about Starmer and McSweeney disagreeing about the two-child cap than her own correspondence
Yeah,
about
with Rachel
tax,
Reeves.
right?
Yeah.
And it would make more sense to me, for instance, let's say, like, who would be in line to get Rachel Reeves' job if she was out as Chancellor?
Pat McFadden.
Okay, so it would make more sense to me if Pat McFadden leaked the Angela Rayner stuff. Like I said, that's just a scenario. I'm not suggesting this is what happened. The point is that Morgan McSweeney has become the story. Like, the value of that kind of advisor figure is primarily their anonymity and their behind the sceneness. The moment they become a protagonist, they cease to be as useful. And so I think the briefings and counter briefings, and this isn't a partisan point, because this is something, an identical point that I said about the Johnson government, right? That the briefing and counter briefing is a dysfunction you will see in a government that's much older than a year old. It's kind of too soon for this to be happening. And so there needs to be some kind of sanitization exercise. The one thing that is certain is that this can't go on for 4 years, right? You can't have factions briefing against each other. And so I think Starmer, with the widely expected reshuffle in June, will have to do the thing that Starmer really hates doing most and pick a side. Quiet riot. The UK EU summit has come and gone. And what I wanted to know was, everyone's now had their let's have a drink moment, let's deflate a little bit, the adrenaline has gone out, and they're back at work. Are you seeing much evidence of things beginning to be actioned, as it were? Stuff being drafted to operationalize the stuff that was discussed. And I think there's a council meeting coming up.
That's right. No, I haven't seen sort of hard evidence of it, but everybody who is anybody on either side of the channel who wants this to succeed is saying the biggest risk we face now is loss of enthusiasm on both sides, and that both business communities within Europe, within the UK, voter groups that want it, civilian groups, civil society groups, we have got to keep the pressure up. You know, as much as it wasn't everything everybody wanted, my God, it was better than what we had. And we have to make sure that we get what was promised from this summit. So there is a real sense that because it was quite difficult to negotiate, particularly in the final few days, and new demands being made on both sides, that there is some bruising from it, and that therefore we do not want the UK to kind of drift further towards the Anglosphere, because Europe wasn't quite so willing on defence as perhaps we'd anticipated, and more difficult on SPS and whatever. And on the EU side, as they face their own domestic elections, particularly, of course, all eyes on France for 2027, that they've got those issues that they need to deal with, and groups within their own territory they have to ameliorate, that everyone might just think, you know what, I know we've committed to annual summits, but whew, can we really bring ourselves to do the detail on it? Campaigns and civil society groups and business groups and trade bodies are all like, okay, take a beat and then let's go again. Keep the pressure up, make them all realize we want this, that they will be rewarded for it if they deliver it, remind them of the economic boon that comes if they get all of this done, and really cajole them into doing more, you know, carrot, not stick.
I looked it up, and there is a council meeting on Monday and Tuesday, actually. So that will be interesting to get some
Yeah,
intel from that. I'll
great.
try and speak to my contacts after that to bring you at the next regular episode, the next Thursday episode, as it were. That'll be an interesting one, because I think on the margins, people will be talking about what just happened in the UK. And also there is the quite juicy issue of how I think the EU will proceed against Hungary. with the sanctions that are being proposed, which I think is quite a key thing going on. So we'll keep an eye on that for you and bring you some news next week.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
As we recorded the main show earlier in the week, reports of starvation and aid not getting through to Gaza were ratcheting up the headlines alongside news of fresh Israeli airstrikes and a change in tone from Trump towards Benjamin Netanyahu. Rather than offer scant reference, we wanted to talk to someone with deep knowledge of the conflict. So earlier today, Alex caught up with friend of the show, foreign policy expert and founder of the brilliant Behind the Lines podcast, Arthur Snell, to bring you everything you need to know. Let's have a listen.
Hi, Arthur. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Alex.
As our resident foreign policy expert so often, I turn to you on the Israel-Gaza issue because I'm quite confused about a few aspects of it. So the first one is Israel seems to be doing what it's been doing for more than a year now. So what has changed? Why does there seem to be more of an international reaction to what is going on? Is Israel doing something differently?
It's a good point, because there's definitely been a major shift in the international response. We can look at the UK's response, but by no means unique. I think there's a couple of things that have caused this. One is this blockade on aid going into Gaza, which has been there since March. And you might say, well, we're only talking about it in May, but inevitably the severity of it mounts over time. Then the other thing is the renewal of a major military operation by the Israelis. I think the difference is that they've been now bashing away at Gaza since 2023, and it's very, very clear that they can't defeat Hamas militarily. One might say that was obvious from day one, but now it's not in doubt, because we know that Hamas is still there. We know that they're still able to hold hostages. And Israel has done two things. Let's be clear. The government of Netanyahu has done two things. One is that they've announced that they're going to continue military operations with the objective of controlling every square inch of Gaza. And secondly, with less clarity, but it is equally obvious that they are really not very bothered about getting their hostages out anymore. And I think the realization that they're insisting on carrying out a military operation that really nobody seems to believe that they can achieve, even Israeli military. You'll hear retired generals and all kinds of experts acknowledging that there is no proper objective to this operation. So then what you're doing is just meeting death and destruction on the people of Gaza for a sort of utterly pointless purpose.
I'm really interested in what you said about the hostages, because that would then seem to indicate that the United States negotiating directly for the last of the American citizens being held in Gaza and achieving their release about 10 days ago now, when Trump was touring the Middle East. Maybe that was the signal to international partners that it's okay to take a slightly different stance towards Israel now. Would that be overreading it?
Well, I don't think it is. No, so that was very striking that you've got Steve Witkoff, who is Trump's sort of point man on, it would seem, every negotiation. Let's be frank, on Ukraine and Russia, he doesn't seem to know what he's doing. But on this issue of the hostages, he's become extremely invested sort of emotionally in the question. And he has spent time with Israeli hostage families, something that Benjamin Netanyahu has never done. So we have this really quite extraordinary situation. And as you say, the Americans made a decision to negotiate unilaterally for the last American hostage. But of course, this person is a dual citizen, so he's American-Israeli. What that illustrates is a wider picture of Trump losing patience with Netanyahu. Now, it's well known that they don't actually like each other very much. They sort of have a similar style in some respects, but they don't like each other very much. Trump chose not to visit Israel on his recent tour of the region. He spent time with the Gulf Arabs and, doing his big deals. Similarly, J.D. Vance also didn't visit Israel on a recent Middle Eastern jaunt. So, yeah, I think it's a lot easier for Keir Starmer, and again, this is, we don't get prizes for courage here, but it's a lot easier for Keir Starmer to come out and give Israel the sort of hairdryer treatment when they know that Trump is also pretty fed up with them. And it may even be possible, as implausible as it sounds, that Trump doesn't like hearing about children starving in Gaza. I'm not saying that Trump's in any way a commendable person, but it is not impossible that these things get to him.
I don't doubt that, actually, whether it's because of empathy or humanitarian morality, or whether it's because it attaches a stench to international regimes that are kind of backing in this effort.
Yeah.
And also because, of course, we have discussed many, many times in the past how Trump hates spending money on foreign wars because he kind of sees it as his money. And this may be providing him with the cover to do the same thing that essentially he seems to be doing in Ukraine, to wash his hands of the whole thing and say, I tried, and you don't want peace.
The real incentive for him, he can say, I've done my best with you guys in Israel. As you say, you can't be helped, but never mind, I'll spend more time with the Saudis who want to give me $1 trillion. Now, the $1 trillion number is just a crazy number that Trump has dreamed up, but there will be real money to come from the Gulf, and that's the kind of thing he's really into.
Yeah, he claimed he took $4 trillion on the flight back. I mean,
it's hard to keep up.
Basically, if you add all the tentative deals up, it's actually about 2 trillion, but obviously they're all with private companies. When the Saudis say we will invest 1.2 trillion into AI, it's not going to America in any tangible way. It's going to private companies that might decide to base their plants in Malaysia. So it doesn't translate into any kind of tangible benefit in terms of federal money, but, Trump will Trump. How significant is the change of stance from the UK government and actually other European governments? And is that the ceiling of their criticism, or are we seeing the opening move into a slightly more distant relationship with Israel?
Yeah, that's an important question. I mean, historically, obviously, the UK will be one of the least critical of Israel, probably alongside Germany, and clearly Germany, that you've got the particular historic overhang there. France is a country that, whilst having a significant Jewish population and close relations with Israel, that they're prepared, and history bears this out, they're prepared to be a little bit more confrontational ordinarily. But this new stance that you're seeing right now is being echoed at high levels with EU officials, people like Kaja Kallas, certainly coming out of Paris as well. And one wonders whether there's a lead up to the idea of recognition of a Palestinian state. Now, obviously, a small number of EU countries, I think Spain, Ireland, Sweden may have already done that. To be blunt, it hasn't sort of helped the Palestinians get closer to statehood, really. That's not me saying it's pointless or shouldn't have happened, but it's hard to point to a major outcome from it, is what I'm saying. If the UK and France did that, it does give it a lot more heft. But for all that we are declining post-imperial powers, actually, we're in the UN Security Council, we're nuclear armed states, we have considerable interest in the region. So I think if that is something that is being discussed, and there are indications that it might be, then that could be a fairly important development. But very sadly, that doesn't mean that on the ground we're any closer to a two-state solution. And of course, the big and persistent objective of Netanyahu, as well as staying out of jail, which is his sort of personal objective, is to ensure that there'll never be a Palestinian state. And he, in that respect, is doing very well on that particular project at the moment.
Okay, so final question. Might then these reactions from the West, from countries which have been traditionally friends of Israel, might that kind of reaction actually strengthen those who are calling now for an election, who are saying, you have lost the international audience, including countries that are friendly to us, and actually you're becoming the problem, Bibi? It's time for a change of management, basically.
I mean, it really should. And of course, it should also shift the dial in the election itself. The difficulty is that he's such a good politician. I mean, his record of getting elected, now it's always a minority government, but he's managed to keep this administration together in spite of everything that's happened, in spite of his absolute refusal to take any responsibility whatsoever, even though he's Mr. Security and he was Prime Minister on his watch. October 7th happened. In spite of all those things, one can't deny his effectiveness as a politician. it ought to have some impact. And I think there's a point which goes wider, and I know that, again, you and I have spoken about this in the past, Alex, but the importance clearly of the security relationships that exist between Israel and Western countries, and, particularly our own. I think a lot of Israelis, yes, there's a sort of mentality in Israeli culture that we have no allies and we will always have to fight for our own interests. And there is some truth to that. And clearly the history of what happened to Jews in the Holocaust bears that out. But equally, Israelis have a lot of allies. And as we know, when the major Iranian airstrikes were attempted, British Air Force, but also French, Jordanian, there was a group of countries that was willing to get into the air and do something to protect Israel. So you would want to believe that the sense of a loss, of an increasing isolation, and actually America featuring in that, maybe for different reasons, for financial reasons, that should give a lot of ordinary Israelis pause for thought.
Fascinating, almost inverse reflection to what Erdogan is doing, but that's a whole other conversation. But he seems to be pursuing exactly the right policies to keep international allies on side and sort of softening where he needs to please Western allies, and hardening where in areas where they don't care, that will help him stay in power. So I always think Erdogan and Netanyahu are two very interesting politicians, very adept at staying in power. And it's fascinating to see them diverge now in their approach. My gut instinct is that Erdogan is getting it right and Netanyahu may be getting it wrong, but we shall see.
We shall see. I certainly think that if ultimately you've figured out what your allies' interests are and you're able to weaponize that, and that's sort of what Erdogan is doing, that just seems more likely to succeed over the long run. Let's see what happens with Netanyahu's approach.
Lovely to chat to you as always, Arthur, and I'm very, very thankful for your insight.
My great pleasure, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. And listeners, we'll drop a link in the show notes to Arthur's podcast.
I do love him,
I know you do.
No need to get competitive. I love you more.
Quiet riot. My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Quiet riot.
The ONS released the latest migration statistics on Friday. Estimated net migration to the UK, which means the people that came in minus the people who left. That fell to 431,000 in 2024. That's almost half of the 2023 total. The report says that this is primarily down to falling numbers of people coming to work and study, particularly student dependents.
Coventry's grown faster than most cities, and now more than a quarter of residents here were born overseas. But not everyone is thriving.
Born and raised in Australia.
Sarah moved here 25 years ago.
I feel like England is known for just being a handout society. The NHS and everything is just under strain or broken already. And it's not the NHS's fault. I just feel like there's just too many people. Too many people.
So would you support stricter controls?
Yes,
make
definitely.
it harder for people to come here?
Definitely.
Even though you can?
Yeah.
You were allowed in?
Yeah.
The opposition will say this is largely down to restrictions introduced by them when they were in power. The government will inevitably point to these statistics as evidence that they are delivering on their promise to bring down numbers. So everyone is delighted to claim credit for this good news. But is it good news?
I mean, no. When we look at the small boat numbers, they're up. And they're the numbers that reform go heavy on, that people feel are out of control. When the average person is provoked in a, vox pop with a journalist or down the pub by their slightly racist friend at the bar, when they're provoked about immigration, that's what they reach for. People arriving on dinghies over the channel. And we've said it so many times on this show, Alex, we need people to come here to work and study. We need people to do the jobs in social care that Brits don't want to do. We desperately need them to fill vacancies in the construction sector, in the NHS, in hospitality, in retail. There are so many jobs unfilled at the moment. And if those numbers are falling, then what? Who is going to be paying our pensions for our increasingly aging population? Who is going to be looking after our sick and our elderly and bringing our young into the world? I think it's worrying when we still have quite an anti-natalist approach to policy making in the UK, where there are far too few incentives for people to start a family and help, change the population pyramid shape so that we have a larger, younger population in the country. And so having an aging population and falling migration, and yet still not reducing the numbers of people arriving on small boats by providing safe and legal routes, I think means you end up with the worst of both worlds. You need immigrants to boost the economy, and you need to offer safe and legal routes so that those claiming asylum, seeking shelter and sanctuary from desperate situations can do so quickly and easily and be returned if they are not eligible. And that would then give people more of a sense that control of the borders had been taken back. So I'm not celebrating this as good news, no matter who's responsible for the number falling.
So I think the headline number will be good news in the sense that we've said this many, many times on the show. Sometimes the feeling of control is as good as the actual situation improving. And we saw that with the figures in the social attitude survey just after the EU referendum, that suddenly people were cock-a-hoop about immigration. The most positive figures we've seen in ages, because there was this sense of, okay, we've taken back control. We can now stop being dicks to foreigners. So that aspect, I think, will be good. I think also there is a sort of a massive drop in hotel usage, and we know that's also a sore point. So it's below 30,000 now. It was almost 60,000 at its height, where people were just parked in hotels, and that is in part linked to sort of a higher level of applications being processed, the queue getting not only smaller but also shorter. And the ONS credits for that the fact that Labour have, gone out and hired 1,000 extra people, probably brought from different departments, to be honest, because not every one of those will be a new hire. But basically, they've pulled people into making the system more efficient. That might end up in a situation where you're saying, well, yes, okay, asylum applications have gone slightly up, and it is only a slight rise at the moment, but we are processing them more efficiently. We are returning more people who do not qualify for asylum. We're doing that more quickly. And the people who get approved, that happens much quicker, which means they can then work and pay tax and contribute and settle, rather than being in this purgatory of just waiting for a decision for years in some bedsit, which is, I think, awful for the asylum seekers themselves.
Yeah, I agree. It won't be a bad headline for them now, but they're just so bad at politics that they can't see how to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat on this one. Just say you're going to bring it down. And as of now, you can point to the Tory government and go, half, ours is half what their number was. But if they insist on putting numbers on it, like we will bring it down by this much,
Yeah.
under 200,000 net migration, blah, blah, blah. Like, don't. You'll be hoist by your own petard doing that. That's not what the economy needs, and and you probably won't achieve it. Whereas
No.
if you just don't put a fucking
Massive
number on it,
hostage to fortune.
you will now forever be able to say it was the highest under the Tories. Labour reduced it. Even if you reduce it by 1, you've reduced it. Like, just shut up.
in some ways, the fact that it's reduced this much is kind of a problem for next year.
Exactly.
Because it might actually nudge up again. But this is what I would do if I were the government. Okay? If you're listening, Morgan, by hook or by crook, do anything you can to massage statistics to get a second year of the numbers coming down. And with 2 years under your belt, with the numbers coming down, where you can point to something very solid happening and being delivered, change the way this data is calculated. Separate out students, for heaven's sake. They are an entirely separate group. They're not coming here to settle. They're coming here primarily to pump money into the economy. So I would do that. I would massage everything I can within reason and without, being mendacious. There are ways of shunting a few applications a bit further down the line or whatever, and making it so that you get a second year like this year, this time next year. And if you can manage to do 2 years in a row, then immediately step in and change entirely the way that these figures are being calculated. With 2 years under your belts of numbers actually reducing, no one can accuse you that you're doing it in order to hide your failure, because you're saying, we're succeeding.
Exactly.
We're just going to make it even better. So that's the way to do it, Morgan.
Quiet riot.
Right. It's a bank holiday weekend, and I've got policies to edit. Yesterday went out a special episode, a little interview with the cultural historian of the show, Debbie Chalice. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I'm always intrigued by the people who basically have to create a field for themselves. It's kind of brilliant, and it's sort of a little bit what Naomi and I are doing and have done. Yeah.
Well, I've queued it up for when I do my batch cooking on Bank Holiday Monday. That's what I'm going to listen to.
Very good. And I've now got all the elements that I'm pulling together for the episode on Aesop's Fables that's coming out next Saturday. So we'll wrap things up here, let you go out in the sunshine, get your fingers a little bit dirty with soil by planting whatever it is you want to plant, even if it is a bulb in a pot. It's still good for the soul. So listeners, thank you so much for lending us your ears once again. This Sunday, we'll be back on Thursday with another very famous guest making their debut.
Ooh. But until then, we hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend. Do pop over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod if you're not already signed up, and to our bookshop if you have books to buy.
We love you lots. Enjoy your Sunday. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
We don't have to record so long today.
Yeah, we can go a bit shorter one Sunday. These were meant to be 20 minutes, remember?
I know.
Right. Shall we?
Let's.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.